Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Marketing Mantra. This is your host Sandeep Malia from 99signals.com. We have a special guest on our show today, Corey Haynes. Corey Haynes is a marketer, entrepreneur, podcaster, and investor. He's the creator of Swipe Files, Swipe Well, copywriting prompts. I'm seriously in love with all the products that he's created over the years. He's also the host of the weekly Default Alive podcast, where he talks about his journey on bootstrapping his startups. He's consulted with dozens of startups on marketing and growth, including SavvyCal, Evercast, Riverside.fm, and Holloway. Seriously, Corey, I would probably have to spend over 10 minutes of this episode talking about your startups, products, milestones, and achievements. So I've just provided a brief summary for my listeners. I'm such a huge fan of your work, and you've inspired me in many ways. And it's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. So we are going to explore SaaS pricing models and strategies on this episode. But before we dive deep into this topic, for those listeners who are not familiar with your work, can you just tell us a bit about your journey as an entrepreneur? Because it's super interesting.
Yeah, it's still sort of in the messy middle of the journey, if you will. But, SaaS marketing has been sort of my career from start to until now. And so I've worked at a couple of different places, usually as like the kind of first marketing hire, which is a really interesting challenge because it's one of the harder jobs, to be honest. When your products don't have product market fit quite yet, or they're still very early on, sort of working with like a shoestring budget, don't have like a big team. Usually it's kind of like you are the marketing budget. But the fun part is that there's like a blank canvas. And so that's where I found a lot of success, is just having sort of free reign, being able to be creative, start from scratch, do a lot of things for the first time, just kind of experiment and have fun. So that's really, like, to sum up, everything that I do is around sort of just experimenting, shipping stuff, getting stuff out there, and having kind of full creative control over it.
Yeah, super fascinating. And you're involved in a lot of projects, but one of your latest project is Swipe Well, and you have a lot of different projects under the same umbrella, right? So I've been using Swipe Well as my default swipe file online these days. And I want to know the origin story behind this. What made you come up with this unique idea?
Sure. Yeah. Swipe Well actually has an interesting tie back to Swipe Files, which I know is a little bit confusing, but Swipe Files is basically the origin was I was doing a weekly teardown newsletter of an email ad or landing page that I thought was notable. And so I basically do like this full kind of written analysis, like 1,000 to 2,000 words of just why I thought a campaign or landing page or an ad worked, and what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it. And that came out of me having a desire to learn more through example, rather than just kind of like theory and concepts and frameworks, really to get practical and tactical. What goes on a landing page for a SaaS affiliate recruiting page? It's like, I don't know. I've never done it before. I have to go like study what other people have done. Let's go ask them. Let's go look at the page. Let's go kind of deconstruct what they've done in the past, and then reverse engineer that to create something for myself. And so I basically just productized that into a newsletter. Eventually, I kind of got burned out on that. And then I went back to focusing strictly on SaaS marketing and SaaS marketing principles. But there was always this gap and this need of like, well, I know that I should be keeping a swipe file. And I had tried 1,000,001 different tools between Apple Notes and Evernote and Notion and, Gmail, Slack, like literally anything and everything. I've tried it, Pinterest, and they all fell short in actually being able to use it in my workflow. It was great for actually like capturing it and saving it, but then I can never find what I saved before, and I can never, really organize or curate in a way per project so that I could use it for a new landing page or for a new ad, for a new email, whatever it is that I was doing. So finally, I kind of just got fed up with it and said, what, I think that there's a product idea here. I'm going to go find someone technical to partner with, as my co-founder, Connor Lindsay. And then that was back in February of this year in 2022. And within a couple months, we had a little MVP prototype to work with.
Right. And also, I've been watching closely the reaction that you've been getting in the marketing community. It seems to be a very popular product on Product Hunt as well. And a great thing is you offer a free version where you can have 50 swipe files saved. So that's pretty useful, even for a person who's just starting out. So you made some comparisons here, Evernote, Notion, and all that. But I think yours is a very unique offering, which is basically focused on, having a swipe file online. And you also have an extension which makes it super useful and super nifty for anyone who's trying to save something online. Corey, I have a personal question for you because I took a look at all the projects that you're currently involved in. You're like a productivity wizard. How do you manage your time? And what are some of your favorite productivity hacks?
Yeah, I was just talking about this the other day with someone else, and I like to think of a lot of the projects that I work on in terms of months. Like, what are like the big rocks, the big projects I want to do this month? And then I kind of break that down per week. Like, which one am I going to focus on for any given week? And then I break it down per day. And that certain days I work on certain types of projects. Usually I batch most of my meetings on Wednesdays or Monday, usually like Monday afternoons or Wednesday mornings. There are exceptions to that rule, like recording this podcast when I just, things fill up and I have to kind of open up more time. But I would say that like 80% of my week is just kind of open time where I'm working, doing deep work, being creative, doing things that are, completely productive. It's not like I'm in meetings all day long talking about the work I'm going to be doing. It's not like I'm working on email. I probably spend about 2 hours a week on email, and my email is a dumpster fire, but that's okay. Like, that's the compromise I have to make in order to stay productive. And so, like 80% of my week is just pure deep work. And I'm very like strategic about what I work on at any given time, just making sure that I'm working on kind of the most important thing and not just little nitty gritty nitpicks, not just little details, but things that actually kind of move the needle or customer facing and that I can see the progress in. And that's really it. Like, there's no real kind of magic to it, to be honest. It's just kind of relentless focus and cutting out the craft.
Right. The fact that you don't spend a lot of time on email, that itself is a good productivity hack, because somehow when you spend a lot of time, checking your email and replying to emails, there is this need in us to reply instantly, right? We can't let something go. And sometimes when you see all these notifications, we have this tendency to reply as soon as we get a message or an email. And it creates an illusion that you've been productive, but when you spend a lot of time on your email, you're basically not doing any of the important stuff. So the fact that you have kept this at the back and you're not devoting too much time to it, that's really good. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why you've been able to manage time so well. Coming to the main topic, over the years you've launched and advised several SaaS companies, right? And it's your SaaS marketing expertise that you are widely known for. And one of the most common pain areas that SaaS marketers have is about pricing their product. There's a lot of anxiety surrounding SaaS pricing because there are so many different ways you can price your SaaS product, right? But yet many business owners that I have worked with treat it like almost an afterthought. And my question to you from a business growth perspective is, what makes SaaS pricing so important, and how do you make business owners understand the importance of this process?
Yeah, I mean, the price that you charge and the way that you charge it is really like the crux of the business and like one of the major keys to growth, right? Because you can get all the users, all the traffic in the world, but if you can't monetize it in a good way, then you don't have a business, or you don't have a good business, right? And the interesting part about SaaS is that it's subscription, right? And the reason why I love B2B SaaS in particular is that it's very utilitarian. Like, people get use out of it. They use it to get value. If they didn't get value out of using it, then they wouldn't pay for it and you wouldn't have a business. So, you have something of value when people are using it, but you have to make sure that there's some sort of proportion of the value that you're capturing, that you're providing to customers in the form of a price, right? In the form of money and revenue that you're collecting from those customers. And a lot of people just don't understand the nuances of SaaS pricing in particular, because it's a lot different. It's not like there's one sticker price where I buy this thing and now it's mine. SaaS is software as a service. You subscribe to it, and the pricing can change and be variable. There's add-ons. There's all these nuances around monthly versus annual, per user, per feature. We can go through a lot of different kind of pricing models, right? But there's lots of different ways that it's, 100 times more complex than just a single one-time sale sticker price. And so, like you said, a lot of people just make it like an afterthought, like it just sort of look at what competitors are doing, or maybe they just look at their their costs of running
Mm-hmm.
servers or infrastructure or the delivery of the value to those to their users, and they just kind of like slap on a little bit of margin on top of the cost, kind of a cost plus model. But what ends up happening is that either their growth doesn't scale very well because as their users get more value, they're not capturing more value, and so growth plateaus and revenue plateaus, or the pricing is actually like a hindrance to people getting value out of the product. And so now you have like this negative incentive where you want people to use your product more, but in order for them to do that, the pricing isn't aligned with the way that they use it. And so they're discouraged from using it, or they're encouraged to cancel or to find an alternative, a competitor. And so there's a lot of things you can do wrong in SaaS pricing. Per situation, there's only a few things you really need to do right, but there's all sorts of mistakes you can make.
Right. So I'm thinking of it from a new SaaS owner perspective, right? I mean, if I've just launched a SaaS product, and you spoke about these different nuances, and we are going to explore the different pricing models that you have in SaaS. It's so easy for a new user or someone who's just starting out to get overwhelmed with the different structures that are involved, right? So what do you think a new SaaS product owner should do? Should they spend a lot of time on pricing? Is that a very important aspect of marketing? Or should they focus more on, building product and providing value to their users?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, I don't think people should spend a lot of time on pricing in the early days. What ends up happening is that in the early days, you don't know a lot about your customers. Your product isn't feature complete. You're not really sure how people get value out of your product, likely. And even just getting users in the first place is a big deal. You're trying to really scrape and claw for every single user that you get onto your product. And so people spend all this time kind of over engineering a pricing model that they think is perfect and that they're going to roll with for the next few years, when that's just not the case. One, you don't have to spend the time doing that. Two, again, it can be counterproductive to growth. So what I always tell people, and this is what a lot of really successful companies like Intercom have done, is you just pick a price, one single monthly price or annual price that's low enough where people or like 75% of your users wouldn't have a problem paying for it, but it's still high enough to where they have to think about it and they have to match it against the value that they expect to get out of the product. So for example, with Intercom, they're going through all these different pricing models and strategies and modeling it out in spreadsheets. And and they asked Jason Fried, the co-founder of Basecamp, and he was like, just charge $50 to see what happens. So that's what they did. $50 was low enough where people were like, yeah, sure, we'll give it a try. But high enough to where they thought, yeah, but let's see how this does. Let's see how much better this is to our current our current alternative. And so you just want to pick something in the early days. You don't really want to base it on competitors, but you want to pick something that is competitive, if that makes sense, right? If you're the new kid on the block and all your competitors are charging $100 a month, and you come in and you have half the features, you're buggy, you're ugly, why would you go and start charging $200 a month, right? It's not going to compute. It's not going to make sense. You're not going to get people in there, right? But it would make sense to charge something like $80 a month more than it would to charge $10 a month, because $10 a month, anyone can pay $10, but $80 is less than $100. It's still $80 though. It's still 8 times more that we were maybe initially tempted to charge.
Right. Got it. And coming to the pricing models now, what are the most common SaaS pricing models, and how do you decide which SaaS pricing model is the right one for your business?
Yeah. I'll kind of roll through a couple of them, but of course we have like the flat rate, right? It's just one price for everyone. Basecamp did this for a long time. They actually just switched, and they switched to user-based pricing, which is another really common one, really common for like, CRMs and stuff like that. Then you have usage-based, which can be like, API calls or essentially pay as you go, where you sort of stick one sort of metric of usage and then you just charge a variable price based on that. There's sort of feature-based or tier-based pricing, where you bundle in different parts of your product, or usage of features of your product
Hmm.
into multiple price points. So you might have like the, $9 a month basic plan, the $49 a month premium plan, and then the enterprise plan, or maybe even a free plan as well, right? So you kind of like package up your product into multiple different tiers or features. And then you have a hybrid of, any and all of those, right? You might have, a pay as you go early on, and then you switch to a more like usage based. You might have a user based pricing plus different tiers for features. So you have, $9 a month per user for X, Y, and Z features, and then $12 a month per user for ABC features. But those are the main ones. And the key here is, one, you want to work with a lot of data. So you want to understand how customers are actually getting value out of your product before you just go and kind of like close your eyes and point your finger at one and pick that one. It has to make sense, right? So one of the keys is the product experience different per user that signs up for the product under a team account? If so, then user-based pricing is usually a really good starting place. So, for example, CRMs, scheduling apps, right? Like those, they have to be per user because they're going to be per user settings, per user contacts, per user views within the product. But then if you get something like Stripe, for example, it's not going to make sense for Stripe to charge per user because that has nothing to do with the way that people get value out of the product, right? People get value out of using Stripe by having people sign up for their product and start charging money, right? And subscriptions, but they're not going to charge per subscription either. They're going to charge per charge, and then they're going to take a flat rate out of the revenue. Features really make sense when you have a really sophisticated product that can appeal to multiple different types of customers with different needs, right? So if you have a customer who is really early on, like a baby startup, someone like Swipewell, who are just getting started, we might not need the super advanced automations and compliance and security standards of a really big ESP, maybe like a customer.io, for example. But we might just need something really simple, something more friendly, something that has simpler features, like a userlist.com. And they might charge half the price, right? But you can see how you can kind of expand, like, okay, if I need X features for this stage, because this is what makes sense for me and my price point, I'm going to get this versus that versus this other one. The key and the kind of pattern for all this is finding your value metrics. How do people get value out of your product? And then you can anchor your price based on the value metrics, which again might be things like number of users, API calls, contacts in your CRM or in your email list. But you have to figure out one primary value metric and then one or two secondary value metrics as well. And then it becomes a question of, add-ons versus kind of these bundles, or you can have a la carte versus these really kind of strict plans that you put people on. That's a little bit more scientific, and we could get into that if you really wanted to, but that takes a lot of data and analysis and modeling actually. But a lot of it's just figuring out what's your value metric, and then which combination of value metrics best lines up with the pricing models that are kind of set before us as the standards.
Right. The different SaaS tools that I've used in SEO, landing page builders, project management apps, they go through a lot of evolution when it comes to pricing as well. And it's, I think it's because of the data analysis they do, right? And you spoke about the value matrix. And I think when they dig deep into this, they probably arrive at a data which makes them change their pricing structure. I wanted to talk about a recent pricing change that happened. And SEO is something that I do on a regular basis, and most of my episodes, podcast episodes, are anchored around SEO, right? And a very popular SEO tool called Ahrefs recently changed their pricing model to usage-based pricing, and this received a lot of backlash, right? If you look at the Ahrefs Insider group on Facebook, and also a lot of bloggers who write about Ahrefs, they were not happy with the pricing change. First of all, I would like to understand why a company like Ahrefs would do that, because when it comes to SEO tools, again, I don't think usage-based pricing is a very popular model there. But for some reason, Ahrefs decided to shift the whole pricing structure to usage-based model, and it's not been very popular with the users. I don't know if they're going to switch it back anytime soon, but this is something that happened. And how does a company justify this change?
Real quick, can you explain some of the? I'm a user of Ahrefs, but I don't have like the billing. I didn't even notice the pricing change. So what was the difference?
So it all came down to the number of reports that a user consumes, right? And there is something called a power user, right? You can have additional users to your account, but a power user can have a certain number of reports. And how they define reports is pretty vague, right? And anytime someone does a keyword search on Ahrefs, that's considered a report. Every time you click on a particular metric on a dashboard, that's considered a report. And let's say you have a limit of 10,000 reports a month. Each and every action that you take on Ahrefs is considered as a report. If you're a hardcore SEO user, you are probably going to use up your credits in no time, right? And you're paying $99 a month for a tool like Ahrefs. If you can just access 10,000 reports a month, that's quite less. And no other SEO tool that I know of has this kind of limitation or don't follow usage-based pricing like Ahrefs does. So I just wanted to know what would be the thinking process behind this.
Right. Yeah, the thinking process was probably seeing that a lot of users were disproportionately running reports and doing research within Ahrefs compared to the price that they were paying. Maybe they were paying $100 a month, but they were using it as if they were a user paying, $1,000 a month because they were just, doing research reports all day long, right? So they're probably trying to find a way to sort of not just offset the costs, but really just extract more value out of people that seem to be getting more value out of the product. Now, some of the potential drawbacks, I don't know if this is the case. I'm just sort of pontificating here. So I love Ahrefs, by the way, and a huge fan of them and their tools. So I'm going to give them like as much credit as possible. But some of the potential drawbacks can be that a lot of people confuse passive usage-based price with active usage-based pricing. So for example, with a tool like Stripe or ConvertKit, for example, Stripe has kind of usage-based pricing in the sense that every time one of your end users uses Stripe and they process a payment, then they take a cut of that and then a flat fee of 30 cents, right? It's 2.9% plus 30 cents. Now that was successful for you and you don't really care. You don't want to pay every single time that someone, you want to have to literally manually, pay Stripe every single time a payment goes through, right? You just want them to automatically take it out or to send you a bill at the end of the month, right? With a summary of all the charges, because you already have that in your mind of, well, I want more payments and this is going to be a flat sort of fee proportionate to the value that I'm getting. Same thing with ConvertKit, right? I don't really want to pay for every single subscriber that I get to my newsletter, but I know that for every 500 additional subscribers, my price is going to go up a little bit, but that's fine because I want more subscribers. I expect that. That's like passive usage, right? Where it's sort of things happening that are automatically kind of happening in the background that's very proportionate to the value that you're getting out of the tool. Active usage, which is more like this case in Ahrefs in some sense, but this is a lot of like credit-based pricing, which I'm not a huge fan of, where people have to actively think, well, in order for me to get this, I know that I'm going to have to pay for this at the end of the day. And they have to choose to do that every single time they're using the product. So now there's kind of like this mental record adding up of all the different reports they're running, the key research they're doing, knowing that they're basically going to be for using the tool at the end of the day when there isn't as clear of a direct relationship between the value that they're getting out of those reports and the way that they're using the product. If that makes sense, right?
Right.
So that was probably the thinking, but again, that's some of the potential drawbacks. Now, I still see on their pricing page they have tiers with features. So they have light, standard, advanced, enterprise. It seems like there's a lot of add-ons and limits to the usage you can do with a lot of projects and data, rank tracker, site audit, keywords explorer, things like that. And
they were
even pay for additional
ones.
So
limits were added sometime this year. I think mid this year is when they decided to change the pricing. And
Yeah.
until now, I don't think they had any limits on the usage. But what you said makes sense. They must have panelized their reports and the usage reports basically and seen a trend for them to justify a move like this. Now, the way your pricing model is marketed is called your pricing strategy, right? For a SaaS company. And what are the different pricing strategies that a SaaS owner needs to keep in mind?
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about pricing strategy. There's definitely some overlap between like the pricing models itself, but I think what we're talking about is a little bit more tactical. What do you put on your pricing page?
Yeah.
And how do you market it and make it seem attractive? And so, there's a lot of case studies and things you can see around like the way that you present it on a pricing page and using social proof and just the way that you kind of package it up and display all the different ways of communicating your pricing to users and potential customers of yours. But honestly, I think that one of the big parts of pricing strategy is just figuring out how to test new pricing and how to test pricing experiments and even migrate people off of legacy pricing models. One of the big keys and a piece of advice for me is people like to test pricing on existing customers. That's not a great idea. What you want to do is you want to test new pricing on new customers only for probably about 3 to 6 months at first. And because this is really like an unbiased view, people don't have like the old price in mind unless they've seen it before. But that's really going to be the only unbiased gauge of how well that new pricing model is going to do, because your current customers are already anchored to the price they know and that they've been used to for the past however long they've been with you, right? And then once you see that you have so you can go through multiple pricing experiments on new customers. And then once you find the one that seems to be optimal and maybe that it's retaining better, there's better average revenue per user, there's better expansion revenue, there's better activation rates, right? You're trying to look at all the different points in the funnel that seems like users are successful. Then you can choose to migrate everyone to that new pricing. Now, again, one of the big mistakes that people make is that they just kind of like flip a switch and they say, hey, here's a new pricing. Tomorrow, you're going to get billed doubly as much or half as much. What you want to do is communicate ahead of time. Hey, here's why we're making this change. Here's how it affects you. This isn't going to go into play for another 3 to 6 months. You want to have about a 3 to 6 month time ahead of when you actually make that change. And to sweeten the deal, we're going to let you keep of your old pricing by switching early, and we'll give you a discount, for example. So if you upgrade to the new pricing model within this 3 to 6 month period earlier, we'll give you, 25% off the first year or 20% off for the next couple of months, or, half off the next month, just depending on what works best, right, for your existing pricing model. And then you want to communicate that really clearly and then actually do it when it happens. Because what can happen too is that people kind of get stuck on all these old plans, and you have people from pricing model A over here, pricing model B over here, pricing experiment C over there. And then it makes it really hard to generate reports and actually see how things are doing. So I'm a big fan of never grandfathering or never having any legacy pricing. You never want to tell, it's like, never say always, right? It's like you never want to guarantee and promise a customer that they can keep their price forever, because everything's subject to change, right? As the product evolves, as you learn more about your customers, as the way that your product works and the way that you consume data and the way your costs work is going to always change. So you never want to guarantee like, oh yeah, you can keep that price forever. I'm always a fan of giving people a lot of time in advance and heads up, really, really clear communication strategy around this is what's better and this is why we're making this move, but always moving people to the new pricing, the latest pricing updates, and then rolling that out, seamlessly without double charging. Or again, you can loop in things like discounts to make it easier and incentives for people to do it early so you have less work. But to me, that's really where like pricing strategy comes in.
Okay. As a customer, I've always thought that legacy pricing would be great, because I would still like to pay $40 to SEMrush like I was initially doing. But from a business perspective, one has to understand that it's all about growth, right? And things
Yeah.
evolve, and your pricing also needs to evolve. One last question I had for you, Corey. I know you love reading books, and this is a question that I ask all the guests who come on my podcast. Which are some of the books that have really helped you in your journey as an entrepreneur, and which are the books you would recommend to fellow entrepreneurs out there?
Definitely. Yeah. Two that I always recommend to people: The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, and
Mhm.
Obviously Awesome by April Dunford.
Cool. You also have a expanded reading list on your website. I'll post a link to it. You also have a very detailed blog post on deconstructing SaaS pricing. So I think that will also be very useful for my listeners. And I'll post a link to that as well. And also, since you are into mental models and you also have a course called Mental Models for Marketing, there was a very interesting book that I read recently called Super Thinking by Gabriel Weinberg, the DuckDuckGo CEO. I think you will find that very interesting if you have not read it. I think it's one of
I've
his
read it. Yeah.
latest books.
It's
Yeah.
great.
Oh, it's great. It's fantastic. So really makes you think about how you can use mental models to improve your decision making skills. Corey, if you would like my listeners to learn more about you, you can probably talk about your website and your product here.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Corey Haynes Co. Pretty active there. CoreyHaynes.co is my personal site and links to everything I work on, but swipewell.app is the place to find a swipe file that you'll actually use.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of the show. And it was lovely having you here. And I really enjoyed our conversation. And I'm sure our listeners also got a lot of insights from this. And thank you so much for being a part of Marketing Mantra.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.